Hi there, my name is Jake Yoder, and I'm the host of Behind the Cutscenes, a video game industry podcast. Now, you've probably listened to about a million other video game podcasts, or maybe you haven't, but basically, most video game podcasts are just kind of about, news, reviews, stuff like that. That's not what this is. This is an interview podcast with people in, you guessed it, the games industry. Now, that is anything from people that are media personalities to people that are developers or publishers or anyone really that will talk to me, so we can get a little bit behind the scenes of what they do in their daily life. As video game enthusiasts, it feels like we try and learn just about everything we can about the industry, but we very rarely look into specific people in the industry. Now, of course, we're all fans of certain people in the industry, whether that be someone like, Tom Howard or Greg Miller, but there are a lot of people that make this industry work that we don't really hear much about. This podcast is just for that, and I'm so glad that you've joined us for our very first episode ever. Today, we're talking to my friend Eva Herinková. Now, Eva is a games journalist. Now, they've worked for a number of different sites, but you probably know them best from But Why Tho, or recently, Rant. They are totally awesome. I've known them for just a few months. We were lucky enough to meet in one of our college classes, and they really have a bright future ahead of them. Now, I will say this is one of my first times ever recording a podcast like this all by myself, especially these first episodes, which were recorded a few months in advance. The audio can be a little rough. Now, of course, I'm doing my best to improve, and I'm growing with every day, so bear with me a little bit, guys. But I think it's an interesting conversation, and even though it might sound a bit echoey, I think it's pretty good, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. Now, I should add a slight note that when I started recording this, I thought that I might title this the Untitled Games Podcast, because I kind of liked that at first, so there's a little bit at the beginning about that. It's not what it's called anymore, but, it's a little piece of behind the cutscenes history for you guys, I guess. Eva is great, and I know that you'll fall in love with them just like I have. So without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Eva Herinková. I guess let's just get into it. Hello. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course.
I'm so happy to have you here on one of the very first episodes of the Untitled Games Podcast, which is probably what I'm going to call it, because I'm bad at names, and that was a tentative title, and now I kind of like it.
Now it's just funny.
Now it's like, I like Goose Game, so
Goose Game.
Maybe this is just a Goose Game podcast.
The Goose Game Podcast.
Let's just talk about the Goose Game for like an hour. How's that? We'll just honk for an hour.
Just honking.
Over and over again. Okay, so obviously we've known each other for a few months now, and we've been friends for, I would say, for about a month or so. So I know who you are, but these lovely people don't. So who are you? Why are you here?
My name is Eva. I am a writer for But Why Tho and potentially Rant. I don't know how that's Life is hard when you're graduating and you're also freelancing and trying to figure out what you're doing. So definitively I write for But Why Tho. Potentially I also write for Rant. And I also stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/eherinko.
Heck yeah. Love to hear it. So I guess just starting, what's your, why games? Like, what's your history with games? Like, what got you into games?
Well, actually, my stepbrother, who is roughly 7-8 years older than me, got me into games because I was 4 or 5 and he would have been 12, 13, and it was the height of the GameCube and the PlayStation 2. So he would just bring home Guitar Hero and Wind Waker and Paper Mario, and I worshipped the ground he walked on because I was oh, I don't know, teenage brother, he's cool. So I would watch him play Paper Mario, and he actually convinced my parents to get me a Game Boy for Christmas one year. And so I got Pokemon, and I wasn't good at reading, so he would read over my shoulder and he'd be like, "That's a Pikachu, you want to hit this button?" And I was like, "Okay." So that's kind of how I got into it.
How old were you at this point?
I'm 4-ish. The first game that I definitively remember being this is my game and not my brother's was Pokemon Ruby, but I was borrowing all of his stuff before then, so pretty young.
I love that. I'm like the same way. I feel like around the same age is when I got into games, also with the Game Boy, and also with Pokemon.
Yeah.
So very, very, very similar upbringing. I love to hear it. Also, I love the Paper Mario shout out.
Yeah.
Because as listeners will probably learn on this podcast, that's my favorite game.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he brought back, I mean, he had the original Paper Mario on N64 and then Thousand Year Door on GameCube, of course. Like, we were strictly a Nintendo stan family. Like, we had an N64 and GameCube that we played the absolute crap out of. So,
heck yeah.
Yeah, we played a lot of Wind Waker and a lot of Paper Mario. And by we, I mean, like, I would try and fail and be confused because I was, like, 6 and he would take the controller from me and do it himself.
Doesn't plug in the second controller, hands it to
basically.
you. All right, you're my partner in Paper Mario. Do things.
He'd also kill me at Super Smash Bros. Melee and be like, you're bad at this game. And I was like, I am 7 years younger than you.
Hey, man, people are pros at Super Smash Bros. At astonishingly young ages. I went to this is a complete tangent, but I went to a Smash Brothers tournament when I was 14, and I remember getting my ass handed to me by a 10-year-old or something, and I was like, I'm older than you. How is this happening? I don't know. Some people just have some kind of natural ability at games, which
See, that's the thing is he would kill me in Super Smash Bros. Melee, but man, I kicked his butt in Super Monkey Ball. So
boom, the more important game.
I know.
But no, I love to hear people being raised on Nintendo, as that's how I also was. Yeah. Nintendo was always has always been such a big part of my life. Literally as long as I can remember. Slight tangent about how I got into games. I was my parents' friends had kids that were similarly 5-6 years older than me, and they were really into Pokemon. So of course, 1-2-year-old Jake was also really into Pokemon through all the toys. So literally, Nintendo has been in my life probably since as long as I could talk.
Yeah,
I love
that's
hearing,
the thing is I was playing Pokemon Yellow on my brother's Game Boy before I could really read. It was I was reading Dr. Seuss books, but definitely not reading enough to be able to understand Pokemon. So he'd be like, "That's Team Rocket. They're bad. I've shown you the TV show," and I was like, "Okay."
Yeah. Similar with me as well. Animal Crossing was a big game for me when I was a kid, and I got that before I could read confidently. Yeah. So my mom would sit. I'm an only child, so I have no kind of sibling that could help me with this. So my mom would sit over my shoulder and would literally read Animal Crossing to me. So
it's like a nice bedtime story.
It is, except with weird animals that go.
That used to be a lot meaner to you too.
They did, yeah.
This is a really funny story. First time I ever played Animal Crossing was, I would have been probably 10 or 11 years old. My best friend Garrett was throwing his birthday party, and so we all went over to his house, and he was like, check out this game, Animal Crossing, and it was for GameCube, and I'd never played Animal Crossing before, so I had no idea what was going on, but Garrett was like, we're gonna make a town, and we're all gonna play Animal Crossing. And of course, I don't remember anything else from the PlayStation at all, except for Garrett named our collaborative Animal Crossing town Boobies when we were 11 years old. That's all I remember from Animal Crossing on GameCube.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
You know? That's not true.
That's all I need to know about Animal Crossing.
I love Animal Crossing on the GameCube. Even so much more than New Horizons. Dude, I feel like such an old hipster when it comes to Animal Crossing, because Animal Crossing was a big, like I just explained, was one of my first games on GameCube. So I've loved this series for years, pretty much my whole life. So I remember I was super excited for New Horizons before it was coming out, when nobody really cared. And now it's out, and there are these people that are playing it for hundreds of hours, and that's just not who I am with games. I'm very much a single player game. So I put 60, 70 hours into it, and I haven't touched it in months, and now I can't go back because my villagers will be so mad at me.
They're a lot nicer, actually, now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I'll pick it up once every 2 months to be like, oh, maybe this time I'll remember to get into it. I have maybe 50 hours. But every time I come back, they're just like, we haven't seen you in 2 months. We thought you died. And then they just forget about it. So it's a lot easier to come back now.
The best thing is picking up I still have my original memory card from when I was a kid. Because I got Animal Crossing on the GameCube came with a memory card. Because
I didn't know that.
Because it requires a significant amount of blocks for a GameCube, I guess. So they basically gave you a memory card with it that had just enough, pretty much just for Animal Crossing. every once in a while, I feel like once every other year, I'll be like, I'm feeling nostalgic. I'm going to hop back into my old town. And people, the animals are like, Jake, I haven't seen you in years. It's been 10 years. Where have you been? Because I never save it when I turn it off. Yeah. And my town is just crawling with like weeds. And I just get really sad. And I know that's what's going to happen with New Horizons. But also I'm just not into long-term games. That's why I've never been into like any MMOs or League or anything.
It's hard for me to remember to keep up with it, especially when new games come out. Like, I could be playing my World of Warcraft account right now, but also like Ghost of Tsushima came out a month ago, so why would I not be playing that? Like,
exactly. That's exactly how I am, where I'm always just kind of on the zeitgeist. I wish I wasn't. Honestly, like, I've heard people say this, and I kind of agree. I wish they would like have a year where like just nothing came out.
Yeah.
And then it was like, all right, this is your backlog year, like where you can take
so much to do.
There are a bunch of the games on my shelf right now. I haven't even finished. So, but I'm a completionist when it comes to stuff. So there are some games I've played the first like 3 hours and never touch again, and then there's other games I put like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I have like 150 hours in.
Yeah.
Where I could have beaten the story in like 40 and been like, all right, moving on.
That's a game I need to get back into.
Odyssey is great, but that's neither here nor there. So back to you. So we know how games got into your life. Mm-hmm. Why games journalism? Because as I'm sure I'll explain, as you explained, and I'll explain in the intro, you are primarily a games journalist.
Yep.
So why games journalism? What got you into writing and podcasting and such?
Honestly, it's a pretty, all things considered, recent development. I really fell out of games probably like in middle school, high school areas. So I almost completely missed the PlayStation 3 and the early part of like PS4. I like just totally missed those generations until like I got a PS4 in 2018, I think. But I had like a, I don't know, quarter life crisis, maybe almost 2 years ago now, where up until my junior year of high school, I had been doing mostly radio and like music, entertainment, journalism stuff. And I had a moment where I was kind of like, I don't know if this is what I want to be doing, because I love doing radio stuff, but also when it comes to like a long-term career, sitting in a tiny room by myself or with like two other people all day, just being like, and that was, I don't know, whatever, by Ariana Grande. Like, I was like, I just don't know if I can do that for like 20 years and be happy.
Right.
Because I'm a super social person.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was in high school at some point, I was like, I think it was when Mario Maker came out. I, for some reason, got really into Mario Maker, and I started listening to a bunch of the IGN podcasts, so like Nintendo Voice Chat and Beyond and everything. And that kind of led down a rabbit hole of like, I started following games journalists on Twitter and like getting really back into games. And I got a Wii U for Christmas because I was like, Mom, I really just want to play Mario Maker. And that's about all I did play on my Wii U.
Oh, the Wii U.
And then when the Switch came out, I took all my savings from my like year and a half of working before that. And I went to Best Buy and I camped out with my partner at the time for like 3 hours to get a Switch on launch day. So Nintendo once again got me back into games. So like a year or two ago when I had my quarter life crisis, I was like, well, what am I really interested in other than music that's been around for a significant portion of my life? And I was like, video games.
Hell yeah.
I was like, well, I'm already in school for journalism. I might as well figure that out. So shout out to Mario Maker, I guess.
Dude, games, that's such an interesting way to like fall into this profession, because I feel like kind of the same for me. I mean, for me, it was similarly like podcasts and following that stuff. I mean, I feel like it's something I've always wanted to do, but interesting that, I mean, I feel like most people I talk to, it's like, well, I wanted to do it since I was 1 year old.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to hear that it's more of a recent development.
It's super. I thought music was going to be what I was going to do, because I play drums and guitar and bass and all this stuff. And so until I was like 15, what I wanted to do was like do music professionally, like playing drums professionally. And then at 15, like I kind of got a reality check of like, that's probably not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So all of high school and for the first part of college, I thought I would do like audio engineering or like radio broadcasting or something. And it wasn't until I think I started with But Why Tho in 2018. So it wasn't until then that I was like, I could write about video games.
Man, fantastic transition. So how did But Why Tho happen, and why? But why?
But Why Tho? I had a friend named Ash who wrote movie reviews for them. And Ash and I have been friends since, like, I don't know, probably 2017, 2018. I actually met her at Star Wars Celebration.
Oh,
She's
wow.
on, her and my best buddy Ben do a Star Wars podcast that Ash ended up leaving just because she wasn't into Star Wars anymore. And that's the Star Wars podcast that I'm on now. I kind of replaced her, I guess. But Ash at the time was writing movie reviews for But Why Tho? And it was when I was trying to figure out how I could get into games journalism and kind of get experience that I was like, hey, Ash, do they need more games writers? Because I'm bored and thinking of maybe uprooting everything I thought I've done in my life until this point. And she was like, yeah, sure. So she gave me like the email address of Kate Sanchez, who's our editor-in-chief, and I like sent over some writing samples that I like I was like, well, the most recent game I've played is The World Ends With You and Wargroove, so I just wrote up some sample reviews and sent it to Kate, and I was like, can I be on your team? And she was like, sure.
Well, that's awesome. And it seems like you've been there for 2 years, maybe even going on 3, maybe?
Yeah, it's been a while.
So that worked out.
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah. And it seems like kind of smaller sites like that are a great place to start for people. I mean, maybe we're a little bit biased because it's not like listening to this, you're listening to Greg Miller or anyone at IGN who's like, well, I've officially made it, so here's my opinion on small sites, being a big site myself. So what do I know? But it seems like going to a place like that in a position that we were in, where, you know, both of us started kind of writing quote unquote professionally, semi-professionally in college, where it's like we can kind of afford, at least for me, it was like, I can afford to do this and not get paid and put time into it because I'm studying, you know.
That's the thing, is it's like now, as someone who's graduated, it's
now
like,
it's getting scary.
Now that I've graduated, it's like, okay, well, if you had been like, write for this website for free, I would be like, I absolutely do not have the time to do that because I gotta like make my rent and stuff now that I'm not living in dorms or whatever. But when I was like, 20 and, you know, living in the dorms or using student loans to pay my rent, it's like, I can write for free, whatever, who cares?
Exactly.
But Why Tho now does pay, not like, you know, exorbitantly, but it has been cool to see the site go from like, we can't afford to pay you to like, now we can give you quarterly freelance money. So.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's great to see that. And like I was saying, it's definitely going to be good experience. I mean, and I don't know how many like articles you've written, but now there's at least, you know, almost 3 years worth of things with your byline.
Especially because reviews, sometimes there will be months where I do like 6 reviews in a month, and then now like I did so much this year that for most of December and November I've been like, I think I'm going to take a pass on that. Like, I just need to rest my brain, but...
That's how I've been recently.
Yeah, but even when I'm not doing reviews, probably about a year ago, I started doing their news stuff, too. Yeah. So I don't do all of their news articles, but I do get, like, press releases from companies and then write stuff up real quick and post it to the sites.
Yeah, I noticed in my friend stalking when I was looking at your stuff on But Why Tho, most of it seemed to be news stuff. Yeah. So, which is definitely useful and will probably even look better to people than just reviews, which is just so hard. I find it so hard to motivate myself sometimes to write a news piece, even though a lot of times they can be relatively easy.
They're pretty, I mean, the thing with news is like PR contacts is what makes it easy, because then you just get that press release and you read it and you're like, okay, I'll write something up.
Yeah, and you just kind of transcribe it.
Yeah.
And if you're feeling really lazy, it's easy to open up an article and be like, so this happened, here's a 2-paragraph quote from the press release, and then at the end you go, that's crazy, isn't it? Let us know what you think in the comments, and then boom, there's an article.
Exactly.
Which every time I read something like that, I'm like, it's a bit lazy, but I understand it because I have done it, because sometimes it can be hard to get 400 words out of Bandai Namco announced the next Dark Pictures anthology game with a trailer that's 40 seconds long, and is 20 seconds of Remember the Dark Pictures anthology. And
that's the thing about news is I love writing news articles because I like to know what's going on, but sometimes I'll get a press release that's literally like 2 paragraphs, but each paragraph is only like maybe 2 sentences, and there's no picture, no trailers, no release. They're just like, here's a game, and I'm like, that's cool, but like, you know, our site uses WordPress to like get all of our stuff out there.
As most do nowadays.
Yeah, and WordPress for their search engine optimization asks that you have like at least, I think it's 300 words for your search engine stuff to be good, which like when you get a press release that's 2 paragraphs with 2 sentences each, it's like, how do I make this 300 words?
Yeah, no, I feel that 100%. I also like writing news. I feel like, I don't know, once I'm done with college, and I mean, you might be able to attest to this soon if we have, if I get a life update on the podcast here later. I've always felt like writing news would be good if it was all I did. You know what I mean? Or, you know, because it's easy to motivate myself to write a review because like reviews can be relatively easy. I say can because a lot of times they are, but like you would be very surprised when you get a very mediocre game.
Oh, it's so hard. It's even worse when you get a game that's like bad, but you liked it. Like I've had that situation before where I get a game and I'm like, objectively, this is not a good game, and I probably wouldn't recommend it to our audience. However, I had fun.
Right.
But it's not good.
I was going to ask you, as someone who is queer in the game space and I believe non-binary, correct? Yeah. What is that like? Like, do you feel like you have any kind of like opposition, or is there like a big challenge to that? Or, you know, I know the games sphere is very progressive, or at least games and media seems to be.
Yeah.
But still, I figure that there would be some challenges there. So what's that been like? Or what do you, I guess, what do you expect that to be like too, going into a professional space?
Yeah, I personally, up to this point, haven't had any problems with it, but also But Why Tho is a very like minority focused publication, so we try, I mean, of course we do have like some cis white straight male writers and everything, but a majority of our writers tend to either be people of color or queer folks, so with that I haven't really had any issues, and because of that our audiences also tend to be pretty like, hell yeah, people of color and non-binary folks and minorities and stuff. So,
right.
But I mean, I do, it's like I haven't had any issues, but I do see things that I'm kind of like, well, I hope I don't have to deal with that in 10 years once I hopefully have quote unquote made it or whatever. But it has been nice to see, like, I don't know how to say, like, I guess big names in the games industry come out or like show their support for queer folks. Like Lucy O'Brien at IGN is openly gay, and Janet Garcia, I think, came out as bisexual a couple of months ago, and then Greg Miller, not queer, but has been like really vocal about supporting Joe Biden and like queer rights and everything like that. So it's kind of like, maybe those are the media circles I run in because I'm gay, so I don't want to go to media circles that are not gay friendly.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know, it's kind of one of those things where I think that like once I've quote unquote made it and had a big audience, I'm definitely going to have to learn how to utilize that mute and block button a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. As a journalist, I think this is a great, I love asking journalists to this because everybody has their, you know, own opinion. It's a very objective or subjective question. What do you think journalists, because you brought up Greg Miller being very vocal about Joe Biden, which alienated, won him a lot of points, brownie points with a lot of people, but also probably alienated a lot of his audience, you know, because I do listen to a lot of people, and I'm in some circles on like Facebook and Twitter and stuff where people are like, no politics in games, you know, don't talk about it. Like, this is supposed to be a space outside of that. While I understand that point, I feel like there also needs to be a point where you do need to speak up for what you believe. And I'm very personally back and forth on it. You know, I never want to be too much because I also believe, I feel like I've been very influenced by our current president's, at the time of recording, our current president's hatred of the media. And coming from the South, where I've lived my whole life, telling people that I am going to be a journalist, being met with a lot of negative reaction.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Even though I'm like, well, I don't even want to talk about politics. I want to talk about entertainment, whether that's movies, anime, or games.
There was one time I was at the dentist's office, and he was like, he said, what are you majoring in? And I said, journalism. And he said, oh, but you're going to be one of the good ones, right? Not one of those fake news ones. And I was like, dude, please just clean my teeth and get me out of here.
I got that reaction from so many people.
Yeah.
And so hearing that, I feel like I'm literally writing a paper about this right now for one of my finals. I feel like I want to meet that with as much objectivity and neutrality as possible. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, especially if I'm working in straight news, but or not straight news. That sounded bad.
Not
but
news.
You know what I mean? Like just news.
Yeah.
Like hard news or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel so back and forth on whether I should be more like Greg Miller and be like, yes, I love Joe Biden. Please go vote for Joe Biden. Or here's my stance on Black Lives Matter. Or should I keep it strictly games? Should I keep it strictly Yakuza Like a Dragon is great and this game is terrible? If I don't like the Falconeer, like, should I keep it? What's your opinion on that? Like, that was a long-winded introduction to that question.
I think about this a lot, I gotta be honest. But
I feel like we have to nowadays.
One of the main things I've noticed, I kind of have like two different things to say about this. One of the things I've noticed is I feel like you and I and other people in similar situations to us think about this a lot more because we have a like school background in journalism. I've noticed that a lot of people who came up as content creators and then shifted into games journalism or whatever don't seem to think about it quite as much, probably because they haven't had their professors drilling into them like, you can't put a political bumper sticker on your cart because you're supposed to be a source of truth and information, which like is true, but also like it's weird with games.
Right.
And my stance with games is kind of like, in my reviews, I typically don't try to mention anything unless I think that it could be like upsetting to people.
Right.
This is such like an insignificant, like, I don't know, example, but I reviewed Destroy All Humans, the remake, over the summer.
As did I.
Yeah, and I love that game. That was my favorite PlayStation 2 game of all time. Like,
wow.
I love Destroy All Humans. Yeah, and it's like when I was playing the remake, which I thought was great, there were some moments where like you would scan people's brains and it was like, is that homophobic because it's actually homophobic, or is that homophobic to be like ironic and make fun of people who are homophobic? And I couldn't tell, so I just mentioned in the review like, this thing popped up, you might not like it. I couldn't tell if it was ironic or not, but it was in there.
Yeah, or people could argue, well, that game takes place in like the 50s.
Yeah.
So everybody was homophobic in the 50s or whatever.
It's one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to be like, don't play Destroy All Humans because this line was homophobic. It's like, it could have been homophobic. It could have been making fun of homophobes. It also could have been the fact that the game was made in like 2005. Like,
right.
I don't know. And that's kind of how I feel about games as a journalist, is like, I don't know, if a game is really transphobic, I might mention it in my review, but it's not going to be, just because I feel like people should be aware of it in case they don't want to experience that, but I'm going to not put my personal opinion about it in there. I think with content creators, it's a little different. Like, I love Kinda Funny, but they are more content creators than like actual journalists. So
they are so weird. I'm telling you, because I've kind of gotten back into their content recently.
Yeah.
I honestly think I was talking to you because remember when we like first met, I was like, I don't really like Kinda Funny. But then I've started listening to them recently, and I kind of like them more. And they even mention themselves that they're this weird in between.
Yeah.
Where like it seems like they're treated by the games industry themselves kind of as like an IGN or a Polygon, where they get all the. They get a bunch of, obviously, review copies, but they also get the, like, fancy media, like, boxes and stuff, you know what I mean? And it is weird because, they don't have, like, they don't post, like, articles. Yeah. It's all just YouTube videos or Patreon videos and stuff. But, like, it is a weird in-between. Sorry, that was another weird tangent.
No, it's definitely a weird in-between, but that's kind of how I feel is, like, with Kinda Funny or Twitch streamers or, like, Yang on YouTube or something. Like, if they are, like, go vote for Joe Biden or, like, go vote for Trump or whatever, it's like, I might not agree with their political opinion, but I think they have the right to say that. Whereas if I was reading an IGN article and they said go vote for Joe Biden at the bottom, I'd be like, whoa.
Well, see, here's the, because, like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But what does happen is you've got Brian Altano and Max Scoville and Lucy O'Brien and Janet Garcia, among others, I'm sure, of IGN, which to me, like, those people, along with Jonathan Dornbush and a few others, kind of are IGN to me. When I think of IGN, I think about like those people. And at least some of them, almost maybe all of them that I mentioned, except for maybe Jonathan Dornbush, I don't really know. I'm not really sure, but a lot of them.
He's not as active as he is on social
but
media.
especially Brian Altano, like very pro Biden on Twitter and very political on Twitter. Janet Garcia, like we were talking the other day, how we both like her because she's not afraid to call out people's bullshit. You know what I mean? So like, what's your opinion on maybe that? Because in more traditional journalism that we'd be in, I don't think we're ever going to be in a space where we are going to, unless it's a very editorial, very opinion, like we're working in opinions.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we're ever going to be in a space where we even have the opportunity to put our political opinion in a review or something. I mean, maybe in a review, but like, in articles. But like Twitter, it's all the time. Facebook, it's all the time. Whatever people are using in 5 years, What's your opinion on putting your political opinion out there like that in those spaces?
I mean, I don't know, because on one hand, like, I understand why, like, journalism school teaches you not to do that stuff, but on the other hand, I do tend to think, like, the games industry is, or at least was historically, predominantly, like, white men that were in charge of everything, especially for people like Janet Garcia or, like, Lucy O'Brien, who, like, part of their identities are just so inherently quote-unquote political for, like, no reason. Like, for Janet Garcia to be a Hispanic woman who is bisexual, like, people are going to politicize her no matter what. Same with Lucy O'Brien for being a queer woman. So it's kind of like, I understand why journalism school tells you not to do that, but at the same time, like, nobody is going to IGN to, like, figure out what election policy, like, what, like, the thing I learned in journalism was, like, people want you to be neutral so that when they read an article about, like, here are candidates' platforms, they don't think that you're biased. And it's like, well, Jonathan Dornbush is never going to publish a piece on IGN that's like, here's what Bernie Sanders is running on for his next senatorial race. So I kind of think it doesn't really bother me, but then at the same time, a lot of these people are also, like, on the same quote unquote side that I'm on, of, like, queer and trans lives matter, black lives matter, whatever. I'm sure I would feel differently if I was not on that side, or if they were spouting stuff, against that. But it doesn't really bother me, because video games don't influence my political views. Sometimes political views influence how I think about video games, but I'm not going to play, I don't know, I'm not going to play Detroit Become Human and then go home and be like, yeah, we should have androids. Like, that's not how I'm going to think about things.
For sure. Yeah, I'm always so back and forth on how I feel, and I'm still kind of settling on a decision.
See, for me personally, I just kind of tend to not talk about politics on Twitter unless it's something that I feel like, well, I don't want people, it's like, I'm queer, I use they, them, it's all in my Twitter bio, like, I'm gonna be politicized no matter what I do. So it's one of those things where it's like, I will say Black Lives Matter, or whatever, like, trans lives matter, what else is out there, because, I also had this moment, where I was, like, worried about future employers for a bit, and I was like, well, I don't want anyone who's not going to hire me because I said Black Lives Matter on Twitter to... For sure. I don't want to work for them if they don't think Black Lives Matter.
Right,
so.
Yeah. No, that's something I like hearing everyone's opinion about, because people, especially, you're right, I think we do think about it more just because our classes talk about it all the time.
That's the thing, is, like, from start of my first year of school, it was like, you can't even put a bumper sticker on your car. And now here I am working in games industry, where a lot of the journalists are very much like, here's my explicit political opinion. And it's like, well, my silly little brain doesn't know how to wrap my head around both of those things.
For sure. So I guess transitioning away, from politics and stuff, like, let's look at you when you said, you mentioned earlier 10 years when you've made it. What does made it mean for you? The two of us are...
Good question.
The two of us are very young, relatively, journalists. Also, I feel very bad about myself when I look at someone like Scott the Woz, who's, like, I think your age. I'm a little bit younger than you, so about 2 years older than me.
Man, when I look at, like, Janet Garcia and Blessing Adeoye Jr. are, like, 26, 27, and I'm like, oh my god, that's 3 years away from me.
Yeah, and they've got all these huge, either millions of followers on YouTube or just big job that's kind of funny or IGN, and it's like, man, that I feel bad about myself.
Yeah.
But relatively, when you look at most people, we are still young in this space. So we definitely still haven't made it.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean for you? Like where if you could be anywhere in 10 years, where would you be?
I mean, my dream job would be probably an editor of some sort at IGN. Like, I would love to be a Jonathan Dornbush, a Lucy O'Brien. However, realistically, I think for me, made it just means a full-time job in games. Because those are pretty hard to get. Yeah. There's a lot of freelancing. There's a lot of contract work. I think for me, it's just like, we're paying you full-time to be on our staff as a day job. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, that's when I'm like, nice. Yeah. I did it.
Do you want to stay in full, like, hard journalism, like, full-time? Or would you ever see yourself taking on a position at, like, a publisher or working PR or being a community manager or something like that? Because a lot of people that start out like us, or even make it, quote unquote, like Andrew Goldfarb, famously for me, IGN had, what I would consider a dream job at IGN, and now works at Sucker Punch, which also could be another dream job. But a lot of people do that, Would you ever see yourself potentially making that jump, or do you want to be?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, I would much rather be in the like news and journalism review sphere, just because that's the kind of writing I enjoy the most. But I mean, I didn't get any of the jobs, but also the job market is, like, rough right now, and games is already competitive. But when I was, like, in the midst of my enormous job search a couple months ago, I was applying for, like, PR and community manager positions and stuff, because for me, it's kind of like, I don't really care what specific role I'm doing as long as I'm interested in it. And for me, like, if you were like, do you want to work in PR for, like, I don't know, Coca-Cola, I'd be like, no, I don't really I drink Coke, but I don't really care. But if somebody was like, you want to do PR for this indie studio, I'd be like, sure, I love video games.
For sure, yeah. That's definitely how I feel about it too. Like, as long as I'm somewhere in games, or even just in media. Let's talk about streaming.
Yeah.
How long have you been streaming?
Honestly, not long at all. It was a thing. It was like a quarantine boredom thing. Mm-hmm. So since we were in college at the time when, like, the pandemic first hit and everything went on lockdown, I was living in an apartment with 3 other people, and all 3 of those people decided to go home. They were all from different cities, so they were like, quarantine's hitting, I'm gonna go home and stay with my parents. So all of a sudden I had a 4-bedroom apartment, and it was just me. Wow. And I was going insane. Like, it was from March to the start of August, I just lived completely alone in this apartment.
God. And in the, like, height of don't go anywhere,
and it's like, I couldn't, inside. I mean, like, my mom lives in town, but I couldn't go see her because, like, I don't want to be stupid, and it's a pandemic, and my mom and my sister are both at risk, so it was like, I would FaceTime them sometimes, and, like, FaceTime my friends, and sometimes hop on Fortnite, but it was like, I was just alone. So I started streaming over the summer, like, natively from my PS4 just to, I don't know, like, at the very least, there's no one to talk to, so I'll talk to myself,
Right.
And then recently, probably over the past month or two, when I kind of realized that, like, because of the job market, because of how games are, I'm probably not going to get a job full-time within the industry right now. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, one thing that I could do, I guess, is just some content creation on the side and start experimenting with video and everything, because that's a huge blind spot for me. I basically avoided any sort of video stuff at all the entire 4 years I've been in college. So I was like, well, I'll learn how to use capture cards, or I'll learn how to use OBS. I'll teach myself all of these things, and then I'll have fun and I'll stream and everything. So I've been streaming roughly since probably, like, May, but I haven't really put that much effort into it until recently. Mm-hmm. And even then, it's kind of hard, because it's like, I technically have a streaming schedule, but when school pops up or work or whatever, it's like, well, I can't do it Tuesday, so I'll have to do it Thursday. And I'm hoping that after graduation and things sort of settle down, I can have a consistent stream schedule and like, get to it.
Yeah, especially because maybe once you get, like, a quote-unquote day job, you will have nights or whatever, to kind of, it's where it isn't like college where it's like, oh, I have to be studying all the time for this next thing. So
ready to not have homework so that I can play Yakuza 0 on Twitch.
Yeah. Do you have, like, I don't know, I don't want to to sound like a dick asking this, but like, do you have like an audience, or like are there
Yeah,
people?
I mean, I think I'm pretty small right now. I think I literally only have like maybe 40 followers at the moment. But
Hey, that's more than me.
There are, yeah, true. But there are people that tune in pretty regularly and like to watch. Like, it kind of depends on what game I'm streaming. So, like a couple months ago, I was streaming The Witcher 3 pretty often, and there were 2 or 3 people that every time that I streamed, they would come in and they'd be like, "What are you doing?" Because I'm bad at The Witcher 3. Like, I don't know what my problem is, but I'm not good at that game. So they tune in to be like, "How are you gonna mess it up this time?" And I was always like, I don't know, but we're gonna find out, like in a friendly way. And they were like, "Let's see what dumb stuff you get into." And I was like, God only knows. And it's the same with Yakuza 0, where you know, there are a couple of people that tune in really regularly and are super into like the game that I'm playing, and it's cool because they'll come in and chat and I'll talk back to them. And so it's like, I don't have a huge audience, but every time I pick a new game to stream, somebody will get really into it for whatever that brief period of time is, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and then like, you know, everybody starts somewhere, especially since you've only been like doing it since May and only been seriously doing it for like a month. I mean, the fact that you even have anybody that tunes in is awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to me. And also because I don't know what happened like probably 2 weeks ago, but my VODs have been getting some like bizarre views where like I'll stream Yakuza and like there will be 3 people watching the whole time I'm playing, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'm done for the day. And then I'll go and I'll check it next time I open to stream for like, you know, 2 days later, and I'll have like 50, 60 views on my Yakuza video, and I'm like, I don't know why, because I don't have 60 followers, so people are just, I don't know, it's really weird, but it is kind of cool to see those numbers go up slowly but surely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you know, you stick to anything and you're definitely going to see growth and improvement in the craft, so that's awesome. Yeah, streaming is like a whole world that is so foreign to me. That's why I've been talking to you a little bit recently about thinking about getting into it myself, but I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely influenced by some people that, quote unquote, made it in the industry, saying do as much as you can.
Yeah.
So I've thought about dipping into it myself, but it's just so foreign to me. So it's just cool to hear anybody talk about doing it.
Yeah. Well, and it's fun to me too, because like I've been doing the morning show at a station for school for like 4 years. So it's like, you know, having to be like talk to yourself and entertain people for an hour, that's not new to me. So it's really just like the video component, and having to play games while I do it is the extra part. But I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, it's just a radio show, but about video games.
For sure, for sure. Another question I kind of want to ask everybody is, if you're in games, you probably have a few games that are very special to you. So what is your favorite game of all time? Or if you know, a lot of people say, oh, I can't decide on that. What are a few games that are incredibly special to you?
So my favorite game of all time would be Persona 5.
Woo!
Which...
Good choice.
Yeah, I am obsessed with Persona 5. I love it a lot. Big fan. Before Persona 5, my favorite game of all time was Okami.
Oh, good choice.
And it's kind of weird because I say my favorite game of all time is Persona 5 and Okami, and I would say those are my, like, 2 respectable favorite games of all time. If I had to be, like, gun to your head, what is your favorite game of all time that you've spent the most time thinking about and playing, it's Sonic Adventure 2 Battle.
I mean, I love to hear that.
So I think, like, those are my top 3. So,
I dig it. Those are great choices. And yet, you still haven't beaten Royal, so I've heard.
No, I haven't beaten Royal because I haven't had the time. I sunk like 40, 50 hours into it when I was doing the review for it to see kind of like what had changed and everything. And then school hit, and I haven't really had time. But that is one of the games that's on my list of like, hopefully this December, January, where I'm kind of like transitioning from school to my full-time job, of like going into that on the weekends and trying to figure it out. Dude,
it is so worth it. Like the last 20 to 30 hours of that game, change everything. Like we'll drastically change how you feel about the base game. And it's just about Persona 5. And I feel like it enhances it so much. So highly recommend.
That's the other thing about Royal, is that like I'm obviously enjoying it because I love the base game, but there will never be any gaming experience that compares to like what happened to me with Persona 5 when I played it for the first time, because like I bought it on Valentine's Day. My ex and I happened to be at the mall, and it was on sale for like $15, and I was like, you know what? I'll snag this. And then my ex got the flu and was like out for 2 weeks, and I was like, okay, well, I'll play this new game that I got. And it's like every single day, because I was a full-time student in school and working a part-time job, so I didn't have that much free time. And it was like every single day I would get off work at like 6:30 p.m., come home and play Persona 5 until like 10 and then go to bed for like 3 months straight. Like, I was obsessed with it.
Yeah, that's a great way to experience a Persona game. We'll wrap up here soon, but I do want to hear your thoughts on Miles Morales, because I know you've told me you're a huge Spider-Man fan.
Yeah.
And I think the last time we talked, you hadn't finished it, so I guess we'll try and avoid spoilers and stuff for people who haven't, but what'd you think about it, having platinumed it and everything?
I thought it was great. I think I do have some beef with the platinum, which is that I think no platinum run should ever require a new game plus, and if it does, all cutscenes should be skippable, and Miles Morales failed on both of those levels. Yeah. So while I did get the platinum, I'm still a little bit upset with Insomniac, but it's okay. I obviously liked enough to get the platinum.
Right.
So I loved it. It was kind of hard for me because, not hard as in gameplay wise, but like cognitively, like I think that they did a great job with Miles Morales, like the character, but it was so different from like Into the Spider-Verse and also a lot of the comics I've read, where it was like, it's the same kind of beef that I've had with Peter Parker throughout the years, where it's like I'll get really used to one iteration finally, and then they'll be like, here's a new one, and I'm like, okay, well now I have to scrap the old one and get used to the new one.
Right.
And so it was kind of hard for me to get used to the new Miles, but I mean, I think that like it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. I will get used to a new Miles Morales. I don't have any issues with it.
For sure.
I didn't think he was bad. I was just like not what I was used to in the old TV shows and stuff. I did really like what they did with the bad guys. I liked that it wasn't... I don't know. Like, I really liked Spider-Man 2018, but at some times it kind of felt like here's this bad guy, here's this bad guy. Do you remember this bad guy? And I really liked with Miles, there was like one focus that was really important and like emotional for him, for you to be able to go through the game and be like, whoa, this sucks for Miles. I hope he's okay. Yeah,
the interesting about Miles, in my opinion, is I feel like it's a fantastic game. You had the Tinkerer, who I think is a really good villain, and then you have Krieger, who I feel like is just terrible. Like, Krieger just not a good villain at all.
Krieger really threw me off because Krieger really, really looked and sounded like Eddie Brock from Spider-Man 3, the movie.
Yeah,
and
I can see that.
It really threw me off where he'd show up and I'd be like, oh, that's the guy from That 70s Show playing Eddie Brock in Spider-Man 3. And I was like, no, that's Krieger, the bad guy. I don't know. I was like, I thought the character was interesting, but man, I wish they had done a different voice and maybe different 2000s hair for that.
I don't know. He felt so generic CEO villain to me. You know what I mean? I just don't think they did anything interesting with him at all throughout the whole game.
Yeah.
But I did really like the Tinkerer, and I did like most things that game did. So, you know, mostly positive. Gameplay-wise, I think a big improvement from 2018. Yeah. Even though after playing 2018 Spider-Man, I don't think I would have said anything needed to be improved, and yet they still improved it.
The one thing I liked about Miles the most, especially like platinuming it, was the crimes, because in Spider-Man 2018 when I was getting that platinum, it was so annoying to be like, okay, I have to get 5 out of 5 crimes in this district and they spawn randomly, so I'll just sit on top of this building for like 10 minutes until one pops up and then go fight them and then do it again. And I really liked that in Miles the crimes were not at all like needed for 100% completion, or well, I guess it was because you needed the activity tokens, but you only needed to do each one perfectly once, and then you could be just done with it. Right, for sure. And then they weren't really random, because with the new app, you know, you could you could kind of make them happen whenever you wanted, which was cool. Definitely an improvement from 2018. Makes me excited for whatever Spider-Man 2 is going to be. Oh, yeah. Big question on how they're going to handle the protagonist, because, like, personally, I don't think I want to go back to a Spider-Man without Venom powers, you know? Because that just made the gameplay so much more enjoyable, in my opinion. So it's like, I don't even know if I want to play as Peter again. Yeah. But, like, also I do, because I love Peter Parker. That's the thing about it, too, is that I'm like, I guess I would say I like Peter Parker as, like, the main character a little bit more, just because he's what I grew up with. Right. But I think Miles is a much better and more interesting Spider-Man. For sure. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like Peter Parker's my comfort character, because I'm just like, oh, he's nerdy and he likes Mary Jane. I love him. And then Miles Morales is, I'm like, that's the cool Spider-Man. Hell yeah, get that dude in there. For sure. Well, Eva, thank you so much for being on the Untitled Game podcast.
loved having you on. Go ahead. You mentioned some stuff that you did in the beginning. Go ahead and plug yourself. Plug your social media, your Twitch, and all that.
You can find me on Twitter. I think twitter.com/Eva Herinková, EvaHerinková. It's hard to spell. You can also find my writing on But Why Tho, which is on Twitter at But Why Tho PC. And then I'm also on Twitch, twitch.tv/eherinko. And then maybe writing for Screen Rant. I don't know yet.
It's been great having you on. I think great conversation. And I'm really excited to see where you go next, especially as kind of my peer in the industry. It's interesting having someone who's a little bit ahead of me and seeing where you're going to go, because then I get to spend.
I'll keep you updated, that's for sure.
Because now I get to think, oh man, here I come. Where am I going to go? But,
God, if only I knew where I was going to go.
Thanks so much. And that's it. That's the end of the first episode of the Behind the Cutscenes podcast. Thanks for making it this far. So you should follow us and our guests and me on social media. You can find the podcast on Twitter at Behind Cutscenes. You can find Eva Herinková, our guest, at Eva Herinková on Twitter. You can also read their writing on Screen Rant and But Why Tho. As for me, you can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/JakeYoderEntertainment, and you can follow me on Twitter at JakeyWakey with 2 Y's at the end. All right, guys, I think this has been a great first episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, even with all of the audio, technical difficulties involved. Next week is going to sound a little bit better because it's recorded over the internet. Next week, we have Casey Donnellan, the developer behind Steam game Kill It With Fire. It's a really interesting conversation, and I hope you guys will be there for it. So, without further ado, thanks for listening. I'm Jake Yoder, and this has been Behind the Cutscenes. We'll see you next week.